Alright, part 2 in my video, part 3, 4, B plus C. Anyway, the Mystics videos, so I got through an all. Just on and on, insult, yobby behavior, but, he can't be blamed. He grew up in a dirty country, Great Britain. Anyway, what's the point of this crap? Anyway, the important subject here is going to be cash, and so one of the distinctions between cash and other crap in the world, especially digits, bank digits, is cash doesn't have your name on it, right? You give somebody cash, the cash doesn't come back and say, I want more stuff. But if I buy something with a check, that's what a digit is. Okay, so let's agree to understand a bank digit like a check. The digit has a origin, a producer bank name written on it. The digits aren't all just digits, like cash is all cash. No, each digit has a bank's name on it. Alright, and that digit comes home to roost, so to speak, where that bank has to produce something of value. So I think the also constructive to this is to go back a little in this whole video stream to where the mystic and I tend to agree on kind of the hierarchy of value, and that stuff is what has value. Stuff, things, produced, businesses, things, actual physical things have value, and the rest of this stuff is a monetization of that value. It's a claim on that value. It's a deed. So all of this money is in a sense a kind of a deed. And there's some deeds that are really good deeds and some deeds that are, we don't know how many pieces of the pie they sold. Not too good a deed. Okay, it's a fudgy deed. It's a Cracker Jack deed. Okay, it's a little bit too plastic. And I think that's an important thing to understand here, is that cash is the one closest to deed. It's closest to actual stuff than any of the others. And then you go to something like a reserve digit, or you go something to like a bank digit, a bank check. So again, just understand, a bank digit is a bank check. And the mystic things that have some obsession with cash, as if, this is almost, it's such a demeaningly stupid counter argument to make, that you're just like, well, you almost seem awful desperate if you think I actually think the real world works with a bunch of people in the back room handing cash back and forth. What I've pointed out clearly, though, is that's exactly what the Federal Reserve does, is it converts all of those transactions, puts them all into the computer and comes out with a cash result, and it moves cash to do the final transaction. Okay, so it's like we go back and forth exchanging our digits. Oh, I have a $10 IOU for you, and then he says, you have a $2 IOU for me, and I have a $2, and you have a $10, and I have a $3, and I have a $7, and you do all this switching back and forth, and the Fed does all that go back and forth thing, and then it comes up with a final answer that in the end you're minus $10 and you're plus $25 or whatever the thing is. And it's in cash. So the other thing I think to recognize here is that I don't think they'll come up with anything in tradition of the operation of the Fed over the last 70 years or whatever, 60 years, where the money in the Fed accounts didn't get into those accounts with cash and didn't go out as cash. It's always been a cash system. So for him to say these are regular reserve digits is bullshit. They didn't get in there as cash, and they can't go out as cash. That's, and let's understand the other reason why cash has meaning here is because cash has been controlled. There's no gold mine, there's no cash mine out there. There's nothing that can spoil the cash market except for the Federal Reserve through the reserve accounts. That's what's called the Federal Reserve. You get it? It's called the Federal Reserve because it does this reserve account thing, and it's through this reserve account thing that cash is created or let into the economy. That's how cash gets into the economy. And he knew that before. I mean, he's really, I guess I'll say it now instead of waiting until later. But I mean, he's totally drunk the cognac. I mean, if you watched his videos 5 or 6 years ago, 5 years ago on this subject, he's talking completely different now. Okay, I mean, he's definitely changed his perspective, and maybe that's why he sabotaged the Modern Mystic account, is because he didn't like those videos anymore, where he was talking about kicking the can down the road and how this system is doomed and crashes and all. He's just totally drunk the Kool-Aid. He thinks these motherfucking cunts know what they're doing. He thinks Obama is smart. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so that just makes the task that much harder, because he's clearly a convert. Anyway, so I think that's enough preliminary. I took notes. I'll play some clips. The really important one's going to be in part 3, where he describes QE, and you can really see where this all goes wrong in terms of this idea of the Fed making these reserve digits, and him not understanding what that represents when you make the digits instead of put them there with real cash.
That's when they sell those assets, the market goes down.
Do I need to repeat what happened? In part 1, Gary was implying that the Fed just gave full $1 trillion to the banks.
I never did that, so that's just a lie. I never said they just gave $4 trillion to the banks. Ever. I said quite explicitly, they asked the banks to buy stuff for them and promised them the money that's pretty much the reserve accounts. They basically borrowed the money and said, go buy some shit because the stock market's crashing. And here, put the money in the reserve account, but you can't spend it. That's what I said. I said it explicitly. I said it over and over again. Fuck. It's idiotic.
On the proviso that they bought $4 trillion worth of stocks. I think that's what he was trying to say. But having listened to this video and understood how wrong he is, he probably won't say that again.
No, I'll say it over and over and over again, because that's all that took place here. The Fed created $4 trillion worth of fake money, put it in the reserve accounts, okay, and then asked the constituent banks to do their duty, with the promise that this is your money, sort of. But you'll never spend it. It's your money, but you'd never have it. Yeah, the sync is off in his video, so I'm not creating the sync problem. I don't know if I need to keep playing this part.
What was I going to say? Okay, do I really have to say what happened really in QE again?
Whatever, yeah, your QE explanation is pretty much crap, but he's going to do it in the next video. He's not going to do it here. So I jump to 1520, for some reason. I don't know why exactly. Apparently there's something there I found of some interest. I didn't write down what the interest was.
So they're still loaning a lot of money.
True.
But they keep talking like this reserve account money was somehow banker reserve money. That it wasn't just injected by the Fed as reserve digits for the sole purpose of buying equities.
You won't say it again though, will you, Gary? Because if you do say it again, obviously you're going to have to come back with a little bit more than just, well, no, you've said it and you've shouted it. You'd have to come back with something a little bit more than shouty shout.
But again, and your more is what? Oh, that's right, nothing. Oh, okay, just this bullshit.
And you won't be able to because you just made it up.
Yeah, I made up the fact that the Fed created the reserve digits. I made that up. No, I didn't make that up. They made up the digits.
And that's its sole function. It has no other function. It's not excessive reserves. It's not. It's in
It wasn't put in the reserve accounts as cash. Again, cash always went in and out of reserve accounts. That's what made them meaningful, is that cash had to go in or out. Bank digits didn't go in, nothing else went in. Cash goes in, cash comes out. That's what gives it integrity. And the Fed has the ability to just create cash. This is how the Fed can put cash into the economy, is by increasing reserves. This is how, but there again, recognize there's only $1 trillion of cash in the economy. Why haven't we just printed the money? Because yes, just printing the money would be disastrous. Anyway, on to video number 3. So the good stuff will be in this one. Well, the stuff that we can illustrate where it goes fundamentally wrong between his understanding and my understanding. So what do I want? 11.
Okay, part 3.
Oh, I should have checked the comments.
I think I got to the word. Again, because you're obviously not getting this. Why would a bank want to change reserves into cash, so then they've got vault cash to make a loan?
Vault cash. No, it's cash. So again, why? He's asking you basically, if you were a bank, why would you want cash? Because everything you buy with cash never comes back to you as a liability. Okay? If I use banker digits to, if I'm a bank and I use banker digits to buy an equity off the stock market, those digits come back to me because they have my name on them. Okay? I'm the thing you have to go to. I'm the thing somebody has to go to get that digit resolved into something valuable, stuff or cash. It only can get resolved into stuff or cash through me. Alright? Because it's my name is on it. It's my thing. I created it. It's my instrument. Okay? A bank digit is a bank's instrument. It's its tool in the world, and the dick comes back. It can't just go and go forever. But if I have cash and I buy something off the stock market, I have no worries. The cash isn't going to come back saying, I want cash. The cash just goes, I get my equity, there's absolutely no liability. And that's an important distinction. It's fundamental to this argument. Cash is a hell of a lot better than using a check. The check is this, if I write a check from this house right now, it's essentially writing a mortgage on this house. It's essentially saying, yeah, you can come back with the check and ask for something real. Yeah, but if I have a mountain of cash here, then I can buy whatever the hell I want. I don't have to worry about the house going away because I wrote a check on it. Okay, important.
When that's not how a bank makes loans. Banks make loans by altering digits on computers.
Right, well, they don't alter them, they create them, and they have their name on them. So once again, it creates a liability that they're going to someday have to pay the digit into cash. They're going to have to convert the digit into some other monetizable real thing instead of this fake thing. It's a claim on a real pie. It's not a claim on nothing, it's a claim on something. Can we agree on that? That none of this would mean anything if these damn digits weren't a claim on something real. They can't be a claim on another bank digit. They can't be a claim on another piece of fucking paper. A check isn't any good if it just gets you another bank's check. If I could cash a check and just get another bank's check and another bank's check and another bank's check, the check wouldn't have any value. I have to be able to somewhere resolve the check into stuff or cash. Damn. Alright, anyway. So I wrote it down. Only thing the Fed uses is cash. It's a cash machine. It's not a digit machine. It's a cash machine. Yeah, and so another way to put this is that the Fed doesn't... See, he keeps saying you know, when there's a transaction, okay, he does his little Italian voice, you know, like the mob or whatever. You know, and there's my liability in the transaction, the bank's liability, and then the Fed's liability. There's no Fed liability. The Fed has no. The Fed doesn't have an account. Okay, it has a reserve account. It doesn't have an actual account where stuff comes in, stuff goes out, blah 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 blah. It doesn't do any of that. It just resolves the bank's finances and dilutes it down, condenses it to a cash balance. It figures out what the cash balance between the banks is and makes the cash exchanges. It doesn't make digit exchanges, it makes cash exchanges. And the cash is represented by reserve digits. Reserve digits are convertible to cash. Can I say, how many times do I say that? Reserve digits are convertible to cash, nothing else. Reserve digits are convertible to cash, nothing else. Reserve digits are convertible to cash, nothing else. Somebody refute that? Show me alternative evidence and alternative theory? He keeps going on too, like this is some sort of God theory, and I'm asking him to refute my God theory. No, I'm asking you to provide some other theory, okay, that makes sense. I can refute God by just pointing out there's evolution. Okay, you're not showing me the better theory of money creation. You're not doing that. Alright. I mean, traditionally, before QE, cash was the only way you get money into a reserve account, and cash was the only way money left a reserve account. Cash. I mean left in a going to the bank. Obviously in between the banks there would be changes in the total amount. The total in the reserve account wouldn't be changed by transactions between banks. Understand? So if there was $30 billion in total in all the reserve accounts, that number doesn't get changed by transactions between banks. Only who owns that reserve digits changes. And he's talking as if the amount of the reserves changes through that resolution. The amount of the reserves does not change through that resolution. You cannot fix an imbalance where somehow the balance in the reserve accounts is changed based on figuring out who owes who how much. The switching between banks cannot create reserves, nor can they eat reserves. They can only change who owns the reserves. That's a fundamental thing he's missing. Point it out to him, somebody. That's fundamental. He's not recognizing that when the reserve bank does, the central bank does the final calculation, it doesn't change how much is in the reserve account. It just changes who owns what's in the reserve accounts. Yeah. Mariana, what a jerk. Totally epic. Yeah, sorry. Totally wrong. Alright, so now we'll go to the big one. 1630. This is where he does his QE explanation. And it's fundamentally flawed. I'll say for context, in video 4 he says it real simple. He says, yeah, the Fed puts money in the reserve account and securities were bought. And that's what took place. Yeah, that's what took place. But that's not what you're arguing here.
Something you just made up is wrong. This whole, the Fed just gave the banks money, is wrong. You made it up. You invented it in your own head. How could...
So, I mean, again, he's already conceded the Fed put the money in the reserve account. He's already conceded. It's not made out of anything real. It wasn't put in there by cash extracted from the economy or from the banks or from anybody. The Fed put the money in there.
I show you a document to say it's wrong. I can explain exactly how the money got there.
No, you don't even come close to that.
And show you numerous documents to show how it got there. But I've done this so many times.
It's not how it got there. Again, you're going to tell me that when the bank bought the security, it created a liability and automatically $1 trillion, let's say, of reserve digits was created. No, it wasn't created. There was no cash that went in.
But everybody now knows just about how quantitative easing works.
Well, that honestly, I was saying everybody knows. So everybody knows how the universe works because they're Christians or Muslims. So everybody already knows. Yeah, sorry, no sale.
And what we're 17 minutes in this video.
Yeah,
Quantitative
1740.
easing.
He's
It's
going to
always
get there.
got to be simplified, I'm afraid.
He's getting
So
there.
I won't do it very short, but I can't do it very long.
Yeah, okay. You'll do it wrong.
But not surprisingly, in its own little way, it always makes sense. Because
Yes, sorry. It makes sense for the federal government to buy its own debt. Yeah, that makes sense.
it's always accounting, and accounting always makes sense.
Oh, yes, right. It's accounting, and it's always good, legitimate accounting. Sorry. It's always honest and upright, and, well, fuck you. That's silly talk.
And it's legal. And this is why nobody's in jail for this.
Well, yeah, it's legal because the Fed has the authority to manage our books, but it's not legal in the sense that if people really knew what was going on, which is bubble the stock market, they'd know it's not rational, that it's voodoo economics all over again.
This particular thing for quantitative easing, which is being done all around the world.
And the whole world is bankrupt. We already know that too, don't we? Oh, yes, we do.
And nobody goes to jail for it because
Because they own the system.
the people that understand it understand that it's...
Right, nobody went to jail before the French Revolution either, right? Because they didn't have jails for the criminals then, right? But you had to make the jails first, right? So yeah, and the guillotines and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the bad guys aren't punished until you have the revolution.
something that's very bizarre, but it's what central banks do with banks.
Blah blah blah. So this preface was totally useless, right? Yes.
Let's say a bank has a mortgage-backed security on its asset side.
Right, which has nothing to do with this subject, right? Because these brokers don't really own these securities, right? Brokers aren't owners. Brokers find buyers and sellers and put them together, okay? So let's not pretend that we just had the name changed on some securities that are already sitting in a vault somewhere in the bank, and we just said, well, put our name on them, okay? You know, just, it's no big difference, right? It's sitting in the vault for 5 years. What's the difference if it has your name on it or has our name on it? It doesn't matter, right? So go ahead, put our name on it, right? I'll give you $5 trillion. Well, $4 trillion. But you can't spend the money. And then, maybe a year from now, just put your name back on. How's that? That's what he's saying QE is. He's saying QE is just changing the name on the banker's already bought security. It doesn't affect the market in any way. Doesn't bubble the real estate market in any way. All we're doing is changing the name on the mortgage. So what he's saying QE is me asking the mystic, well, mystic, just for fun, put my name on the mortgage, right? On your mortgage. I mean, no, put my name on the deed to your house. And I'll give you a promise, and we can shake hands and video even. We can video us shaking hands. And I'll promise not to take possession of your house. Okay? And it'll be fun, right? We'll do it for fun. And then like a year from now, yeah, you just put your name back on. How's that? Will it be fun? Will it mean something? Or would it be completely ludicrous? So, he's saying that QE, this thing that somehow helps the economy, somehow it helps the economy to take a security the bank already owned, just ask it to put the Fed's name on it, and we'll give you a reserve digit that you never use. And then someday, we'll change the name back again. Do you get me? There's no way the Fed would be doing this if it was that fucking useless. They're doing it because it creates buying pressure on the markets. Not for any other reason. So he's so fucking stupid.
The central bank will say, I shall buy that off you. The central bank invents money from nowhere.
Okay, the central bank invents money from nowhere. Where is that in Fed policy? Show me anything that says the Fed has a checking account, that it can write checks, that it can pull money from nowhere, that it can make a fake banker digit with no one's name on it, that it can in any way give the bank something besides cash. You show me where the Fed gave the bank something besides cash. Ever. Yeah. Not ever, because they actually had reserve notes, which would be Federal Reserve IOUs. But obviously that would be not from nowhere, that would be a check, which could be cashed for cash.
And takes ownership of that mortgage-backed security and credits the bank's reserve account.
Okay, so he's saying they credit the reserve account with the fake money. So let's say if I give the bank fake money, the bank takes the fake money and put it itself in the reserve account, right? So traditionally only cash could go into the reserve account, but now we've taken the Federal Reserve check, the bank took the Federal Reserve check, the check, whether the Fed does it or the bank does it, doesn't really matter. The check was converted, changed into, right? The check was the money from nowhere that you just mentioned, the Federal's money from nowhere, got turned into, right, a reserve digit. So reserve digits are equal sign to cash, the equivalency of, and so the Fed created cash, but only had it in circulation for a millisecond. It just went like they had the cash, the Fed took the cash it printed, gave it to the bank for a second, and the bank deposited it in its reserve account. Wouldn't that duplicate exactly what you're saying? If the Treasury gave the Federal Reserve $1 trillion, let's say it was $1 trillion transaction, the Treasury gives the Federal Reserve $1 trillion in new cash, okay, beyond the $1 trillion already in circulation, so it's a big pile of money, and the Fed basically just says to the bank, look, I'm going to give you this money, and then you instantly put it in your reserve account, okay? So that's the deal it's made. So the Treasury prints the money, the Fed gives it to the bank to buy the Treasury, and then instantly the money goes into the reserve account. Now that would completely duplicate what you just said, right? Right? And it completely satisfies my conditions, and now it satisfies your conditions, right? The money, it represents cash that now has a liability to cash has been created, correct? Oh, that's right, you can't answer. Damn.
There you go. It's incredibly simple. Go to the Fed's accounts and they will show you exactly what they have bought with their newly made up money.
Newly made up money. So again, why call it newly made up money? Why don't you agree that if you're going to have a technical conversation of any value, you're going to have to qualify what this money was. It wasn't a Federal Reserve check. It wasn't cash. What was this digit that the Federal Reserve made where it doesn't have a liability and it doesn't convert into cash? All the other banker digits convert into cash. Why doesn't this Federal Reserve made up money convert into cash? Huh? Oh, that's right, because it does convert into cash, and that's what it represents as a reserve digit. And that's why it can't be withdrawn, because it represents cash. And you can't put $4 trillion of cash into the economy.
How many treasuries, how many mortgage-backed securities, and if there's anything else there, they'll be there all in the Fed's accounts. And they're all open. You can see it on the New York Fed account, the Fred account.
Yes, I showed the chart in the previous video. That's correct.
accounts, Fred's best. But it's very, very simple. It sounds weird and wacky, but it's all very above board.
Okay, well, whatever. There's obviously nothing above board about creating reserve digits, okay, cash equivalents, and pretending that this money, as your guy said, you're a pay-per-view guy, right? You said the guy's website was you had to pay for it, okay? That's why I call him the pay-per-view guy. But anyway, your guy says the banks can withdraw their reserves and they can buy equities with their reserves, which doesn't make any sense at all, right? So if they, look, if they make a banker digit, I won't draw the picture, but I really want to. If they make a bank digit, okay, with their name on it, and buy a security, and then wait till it goes into the Federal Reserve, it's not going to be, the bank digit's going to be payable on them, right? They're the ones that are going to have the reserve money to be transferred to another bank, but it's going to be transferred to another bank. It doesn't withdraw the money from the reserve account, so you're not getting it. It doesn't make the reserve money go away. It changes who owns it. To make the reserve money go away, you have to sell one of the stocks or bonds that we own. You have to make the federal check go away. The reserve money from nowhere has to go away. The reserve digit that created the purchase has to go away. You can't do it this down there. All you do is transfer reserves from one party to another. So the guy who cashes the check I wrote to buy the equity, he's going to get the reserve money. The money doesn't disappear. He gets it. And then he has to do something. He has to withdraw it as cash. You can't get the money out of the reserve account unless you withdraw it as cash. Or, right, you resolve the equity problem. Your guy would be right that the bankers could withdraw the money and buy equities. Your guy would be right if the equities they bought, well, let's say the devices, the stock devices, or let's find out some other word for the whole class of bonds and stocks, including U.S. Treasuries. But the only way they could buy, if they bought the stuff the Fed owns. That's the only stuff they can buy. If they buy the stuff the Fed owns, then the digit goes away. But they have to buy the stuff the Fed owns. Jesus.
Right. Is there anything there that sounds weird? I suppose I have to...
Yes, the money from nowhere part sounds a little fucking weird. The Fed doesn't have a money from nowhere account. Shit.
Explain again one more time, because this always comes to some people. This is creating more money. Then we have to explain again 1097 in your accounts, 1097 in the bank accounts, 1097 in the Fed accounts.
There you go. The 1097 in the Fed accounts is wrong. So that's just a wrong way to look at it. The Fed has absolutely no liability in the bank's transactions. The bank's transactions are only mirrored, okay, by the Fed, and they're not mirrored inside the reserve account. The reserves don't... Banks deal in... Everybody can understand this, right? You know that banks deal in trillions of dollars, right? Every day, I think. At least hundreds of billions every week. And that there's no way that the Federal Reserve account goes up and down, up and down, up and down every 5 minutes. Like it shoots way up and shoots way down and shoots way up and shoots... There's no way that its balance sheet does any of that, okay? Because it's not where the transactions are being transacted. The Federal Reserve accounts are an account above the logistics, and it's an account from which you take money. It's separate. There's no 1040. There's no part of the bank's transaction in the Federal Reserve account. The final result is what goes to the Federal Reserve account. The final disposition between one guy owes $10 and one guy's plus $10 and the reserve account money is switched. It isn't extracted and it isn't put in. It's just switched. The owner of the money, the name on the reserve digits is changed. The amount in the reserve account is not changed.
You can see that these are not real things. They're just accounting digits. This is why you've got 5 lots of them.
Just understand, they're not just accounting digits, they're checks. So understand, look, is somebody going to disagree with this basic point? A bank digit is essentially a check. That's what it is, with the bank's name on it. The payable by. The payable by is on the digit.
You could even have 1097 somehow in your personal accounts to make 6. Don't know how you would. You've got 5 lots of them. It doesn't make sense unless you understand accounting.
Yeah, whatever. This whole patronizing, silly shit of yours, presuming everybody's ignorant and you're going to tell them what they need to understand for them to understand, and it's just the wrong, I mean, it's just a rude way to argue. It's your business. Go ahead and be rude. But I'm telling you, it's fucking rude.
So, that's the first thing. You've got to know accounting before you should go shouting your mouth off. And I'm
no,
really
I just have to know basic fucking math, and I certainly know that if an accountant came up to me and said the Fed just made some money from nowhere, I would say he's a shitty accountant. If he's going to start talking about money from nowhere, okay, and he can't even call it something a little narrower than that and explain to me exactly what this thing was the Fed used to buy the security, then I think he's a pretty shitty accountant.
Types here now who think inflation was going to go crazy because of quantitative easing.
No. See, it doesn't go crazy unless the banks actually are allowed to take the money. If the banks are allowed to take the money, then inflation goes crazy, because you go from $1 trillion in circulation to $5 trillion in circulation, and yes, that's called printing the money. So as long as the money stays in the reserve accounts, everything's okay. But again, look, it's all backed up by the securities, and again, the whole point of QE was to buy the securities off the market, so it bought it, and they bought from sellers. So Mariana's just so full of shit. She's thinking that somehow the brokers had $4 trillion of securities just sitting on the shelf over there, and they weren't going anywhere, and they weren't doing anything, so we'll just change the name on them, for fun. And what's the difference? They're sitting on the shelf. Who cares whose name's on it, right? It's like Bill Gates' stock, right? We could take all of Bill Gates' stock and put my name on all his stock. But it just stays exactly where it is. It isn't sold, it isn't transacted in any way. Just change the name. And somehow that would do something. It would do absolutely nothing. It would only do something if I gave Bill Gates all the money and then he spent the money. Then it does something. But if we're just changing names, who cares? But why would somebody change the name? Changing the name on equities wouldn't be QE, wouldn't make any sense. Who would say, let's save the economy by changing the name on things? That wouldn't save the economy. That wouldn't do anything constructive. So it's absolutely silly to talk as if there's just name changing going on here. $4 trillion worth of name changing. Yo, let's not stop at 1 trillion. Let's go to 4 trillion. Well, why don't we go to 7 million trillion, right? If it's free name changing and you're just going to change the names back again, well, who cares? I mean, what if I was sitting in the bank's vault and like the bankers put the money in the vault, and because I was sitting in the vault, I said it was mine? Would it matter if I can't spend it anywhere, if I can't go to the store and buy gum with it? I'm stuck inside the vault. Yes, it's my money. I have a huge amount of money. Yay, I'm rich. Wait a minute. I can't do anything with it. What the fuck good is it, right? It doesn't mean anything. The door is the only place the money can go in and out. So I'm fucked. It's useless. It's stupid. I own nothing, even though I own everything. So, well, whatever. He's just got it so fundamentally wrong. The Fed does not make digits.
Up money. the Fed is printing up money and buying these mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, either directly or indirectly off banks.
Again, they're not buying off banks, okay? They're buying them from brokers, and brokers find a seller and they find a buyer, and they put the two together. So there was a buyer, there was a seller in the real world who got the bank digits, not the Fed. Oh, funny money. The Fed just made up some money, and then the bank gave the made up money to the guy. They gave him a Fed we promise to pay you someday thing. No, the banks paid the guy in bank digits, and the reward for doing that is they put $1 trillion of cash in that bank's account. They paid for it with a cash equivalent. But it's only cash when it's cashed. It can only be cash. Cash is not cash when it's in the vault. It's only cash when it's out of the vault.
But the banks, or whoever, had already bought them with digits in the first place. And this is where I go,
I had already bought them with digits in the first place. That's where you go all wrong. The Fed doesn't have any digits. The reserve digits only convert to cash. They can't go out the door as anything other than cash. There is no fucking such thing as the bank or the Federal Reserve digits.
the person had digits, then got treasuries. The Fed comes along and gives them digits again.
The Fed comes along and gives them digits again. It can't do that. The bank exchanges won't account for the initial money that bought the security. The money you said the Fed just made up. That's the reserve cash. So again, the cash paid for, in theory, it's in the vault. Let's just call the reserve account the vault. The money went into the vault. Now the question is, how do you get it out of the vault? And you only get it out through the door of the vault. You can't get it out by exchanges between the banks. Exchanges between the banks will not get the money out of the reserve accounts. Let me say that one again. Exchanges between the bank, resolving bank liabilities and exchanges, cannot get money out of the total Federal Reserve account. The total Federal Reserve account can only be reduced by cash leaving or cash going in. That's the only way the Federal Reserve total in the reserve account can change, is cash has to go in or cash has to go out. Exchanges between the banks resolving bank liabilities will not change the total amount in all the reserve accounts. It only changes the amount owned by a specific bank. Now, people who know what this is all about know I'm right on this. You know I'm right. Tell this fucker. He's not getting it. You can't reduce the amount in the reserve accounts by resolving transactions between banks. Say that one again. No, I won't say it again. I'm sorry. That's patronizing.
More out there in the real world. There are more accounting digits up here in the Fed. But as you keep saying, they can't come out into the real world except as cash. And as I've explained...
Yes, and you keep talking like somehow they can be erased, though, somehow by transactions between the banks. And they can't be erased by transactions between the banks. They can only be erased if the Fed takes them out. And it can only take them out because something, like I said, one of those securities was sold. There has to be some money coming in. The Fed sells one of the treasuries, it gets the money, and then it uses that money to eliminate the reserve obligation. But it has to get money. It has to sell something. It has to receive the cash from someone. It has to take possession of the digits from someone. It has to take their digits to get rid of those digits in the reserve account.
Explained in this video, and a bit in the last video, that money, even if it came into the real world, won't be more money because it would only go to the people. And as it was given to the people, say as cash, their deposits would be deducted until they become zero.
Oh, their deposits will be deducted until it becomes zero. No, I'm sorry. When you infuse cash into the world, it's really hard to get it back again. The Fed has a real problem when there's too much cash in circulation ever getting cash back, because getting cash back essentially means the federal government has to sell something or get some windfall profit or get some other kind of money and essentially not respend it, just burn it. Okay, that's the only way cash comes out of the economy. Cash, money, comes out of the economy is the Fed basically has to burn it, and it has to be their money, not some bank's money. It has to be their money. It has to be the U.S. government's money. So, this is, if the Fed puts $5 trillion of new cash into the economy, that money ain't coming back. It ain't going away.
As soon as their deposit's zero, they get no more cash. The only other way the cash could get out, it goes to the banks, and then it's lent out by banks. And if you think banks are going to go lending out huge quantities of cash, you'd have to explain why.
Why? Because it's not a check. It's a lot better if if I'm going to go buy a car, it'd be really cool if I just pay in cash, I get the car, it's done, the deal is done. If I pay for it in a check, I know I have to have money in the account. Well, how am I going to put money in the account? Oh, somehow I got to get cash in there somehow. Or equivalent, I have to sell something to get cash, to get digits, to get the money in the account. It's all look, all of this stuff, again, you're just not fundamentally understanding what money is. Money is a claim on stuff. Money is a claim. Alright? All money, all documentation that's in dollar denominated, all paper that is dollar denominated is a claim on cash and stuff. Cash is a tiny part of stuff. Stuff is huge, 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 huge. And cash is just a little sliver of that stuff, but cash is an equivalent to stuff, because the government has made sure it is, because it's only let a little tiny amount of it out. Oh, damn. Alright. See if there's anything else. Yeah, so the hierarchy of value needs to be really understood here. It's stuff, cash, reserves, bank digits, stocks, bonds, bullshit, crap, shit, much crap. Anyway. So yeah, if I made Gary money would come back to me, right? If I made money and said Gary on it, everybody would come to me with it eventually if I bought stuff with it, and they'd bring the Gary bills and say I want some real money with a Gary bill. So a bank digit is not anything of, it's not a good thing to spend if you're a bank. You don't want to spend your digits. If you're spending digits, you know they're going to come back to you and somebody's going to want the fucking money. So that's why cash is cool, because cash means I can buy it and I don't have to worry about it ever again. Cash has no liability. Cash has no liability. Unlike a bank digit, no liability is created when you purchase with cash. Alright, moving on to video number 4. Alright, well, I'll read Marianne's. I haven't heard you discuss the consequences of long-term QE process. Do you worry about dollar devaluation or other countries losing confidence? No, not at all. Japan is doing, yeah, so he's using Japan as an example. Right, 1 yen buys you what? Oh, that's right. No, you need like 5 billion yen to buy a soda. Euro is strong because EBC does not affect QE and other blah blah blah. Yeah, well, obviously I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to bother explaining. But if you allow $4 trillion of new cash to be infused into the economy, it would be colossally destructive. There would be preposterous inflation. So this is just idiocy. Stupidity. This is stupid. And it's all premised on his, like I said, you just heard his explanation of QE. The Fed makes the money, but the point is the reserves are really what's made the money. And the Fed put the reserves in there, and he admits it. The Fed made the reserves. The reserves weren't put in there by the banks, the Fed made them. And only the Fed can undo them, and it can only undo them when it receives something of value from the economy. It has to sell something. It has to sell the securities it bought. That's the only way you can take the money out of the reserve accounts without giving banks cash. The only way to get the money out of the reserve accounts without giving the banks cash is the Fed has to sell something and get the digits that belong to it. The digits have to belong to the Fed for the Fed to take them out of the Federal Reserve account. So that's the only two ways to get rid of those digits. The Fed has to sell the equities or the stock instruments, the whatever, the $4 trillion in crap that it bought. It has to either sell that crap and get the money digits, okay, and then erase the digits, or the banks get the cash. The banks can't have the cash because we all know what that means. That's just printing the money. And so that's not going to happen. But when they're going to sell this shit is a really big problem, because when they sell this shit, when they go to the broker, this is going to create sell pressure on the market, and sell pressure is not going to be fun. So you just fundamentally misunderstood that reserve digits are not created and destroyed by resolving bank transactions. That only changes who owns the reserve digit. It doesn't change the total amount of reserve digits. Yeah, that's the fundamental thing here. Alright. Number 4. 3 of 4, 4 of 4. And where do we start? 23. 4 minutes stupid to go on about cash. Well, I'll play that a little bit just because that's probably interesting. Alright, so I just have some notes. I'll go through my notes. Stuff, cash. Alright, well anyway, yeah, he mocks the cleaning thing as the way money got into the reserve accounts, but that's the way it happened traditionally. If he has some other way of explaining how the initial money got in the reserve accounts, I don't think he's going to come up with one. That's how it gets there. That's how the money got in the reserve accounts, is through the Fed cleaning money. Alright, not understanding how reserve digits are created is your problem. So I put it in big words, created. Reserve digits before 2008 were always created, okay, by cash. Cash had to go in. Alright, okay, so 4 minutes. So let's go to 4 minutes because he says something about cash. Cash being crap or something. And so let's get to this. So pleased with himself.
This is how banking works. It's a banking system. Imagine how complicated it would be if everybody, the system was run on boys running up and down the road with cash.
Yeah, so no one's arguing the system runs on boys running up and down the road in cash, or in back rooms doing cash transactions. What I'm obviously sensibly arguing is that all the computer digits are resolved as computer digits with bank names on them, and in the end, the final transaction is a cash transaction. Yes. So, and I think I'm perfectly correct. These and uses actually more complete reversal. Yeah, just this complete reversal stuff. I mean, like I said, if you watch videos he made 5 years ago, he was telling a whole different story. So he's the one who's completely changed. Make loans from nowhere with digits with their name on them. Yeah, again, so this is payable in cash. So when he keeps talking about this idea that banks can just make digits, if he truly said it correctly, that digit is a liability digit. It's not like making money. It's not like making cash. It has a liability. It has their name on it, and the digit will come home. And when it comes home, it's going to expect cash. Okay, completed. I don't know, it's 23, so we'll go to 23. Almost done. Because he really doesn't say anything in part 4b.
I'm going to have to do this one more time. QE reserves are reserves for this reason. Is there another way of saying it? The word people, no, see, some of the QE stuff bought from private people who just had accounts at the bank. But it's easier to explain if we say that the banks had the mortgage-backed securities or the treasuries that the Fed's going to buy.
Yeah, it's easier, and it takes out the whole notion of creating buying pressure in the market. So yeah, it's convenient for you to do that. But let's understand, these are brokered deals. We're not just changing the name on a security sitting in the bank's vault. And the name change doesn't matter because it's just sitting in a vault somewhere. These are securities on an active marker bought through brokers from people wanting to sell.
But this is so clear, isn't it? We've done it. We know what quantitative easing is. That the banks holding mortgage-backed securities.
Holding these securities, right. So he's arguing that the banks had $4 trillion of securities. Right after a huge bankruptcy crisis, they just happen to have $4 trillion of securities just laying around on the shelf. And they just made a request that we change the name to the Fed on the securities just for a little while, just to make us feel rich. Sorry, bullshit.
Or treasuries is bought by the Fed using reserves that the Fed has just made up.
There you go. They bought them using reserves that they just made up. So cash didn't come in, nothing came in, the reserve digits were just made up. Okay, but we know that traditionally the reserve digits only go in or out of the reserve accounts as cash. So it's fundamentally they've made the cash. Now the question is, will it be allowed out of the vault? They've printed the money. Okay, they're just not letting it out of the vault yet. That's all that's taken place here.
That's it. It's easy.
There. So he's just conceded my point. Okay, the reserve digits created by the Fed bought the securities. Alright, and the only way they can get those reserves out of those accounts is not because between bank transfers. It's going to require the Fed to get money. A check with its name on it. Here, Federal Reserve, we owe you $1 trillion. They're going to have to get bank digits from the real world by selling the damn securities. That's the only way to get that reserve money out of there, unless you give it as cash to the fucking bankers. And if you gave it to them as cash, that would be fundamentally insane, because it's the same as buying the securities with cash, which is the same as printing money. Fuck. Okay. No, I think I've done the job. So we'll see what kind of stupid remarks we get from the shit gallery. I mean, you people never really are on the subject. I'm just amazed. You read this shit and you're saying, I just said in the video. Some asshole was saying, what do you think? The Fed shouldn't have fractional reserve banking, or we shouldn't do that. He's all panicked. No, I didn't say there should be a gold standard. No, I don't think there should be a gold standard. I'm not against fractional reserve banking. I'm against the Fed buying its own debt. That's what I'm against. And pretending they're not doing it. And then pretending they're not doing it for the sole purpose of driving the stock market up. And a bubble. Bubbling the stock market.